Yesterday we talked about the weird and slightly creepy relationship between Robyn and Kody, but apparently the two were spotted outside, and let's just say I wasn't even planning on making a video about sister wives today. Not even close. But then I saw something on Facebook, and let's just say it's just too good not to share with everybody. So what happened was apparently one of their fans bumped into the two outside and they asked if they could take a photo with them. Okay, totally normal for two reality TV personalities, right? But what the person wrote about the encounter with the two just caught my attention, and let's just say it's just too good not to share with everybody. So what the person wrote was, "My sister got to meet Robyn and Kody. She said Robyn smelled like onions. She must have been cooking. She was not super nice. Kody would not shut up but was a super kind person. Highlight of my evening." Now when I read that, I had to pause for a second. First of all, Kody wouldn't stop talking but was a super kind person? According to who? I mean, maybe he can be pleasant when he's out in public meeting fans. That wouldn't surprise me, but it still made me laugh a little. And then there's the part about Robyn smelling like onions. Post makes it sound like Robyn must have been cooking, but apparently they were at a mall. So let's think about that for a second. They saw Kody and Robyn at the mall, and apparently the mall is Robyn's favorite place to be, judging by the fact that they were there so many times on the TV show. Anyhow, Robyn smelled like onions. Now I am sitting here wondering, where was Robyn cooking? Last time I checked, most people do not go to the mall to do some shopping smelling like they just cooked up some onions and chopped some veggies. Maybe there is just something totally normal about that. Maybe they had just been to a restaurant that serves a lot of onions. That is totally possible. But still, it's just kind of funny. Part of me jokingly wonders if Robyn has some kind of onion perfume just to keep Kody at arm's length. I mean, think about it. You are at the mall and someone is over there smelling like onions. That's just not something most people want to smell like. And it was mentioned in that post that Robyn wasn't really nice during that interaction either. Well, I may not know for sure if that's true or not, but it definitely fits with how many fans tend to describe her based on what we've seen of her in the show. As for Kody, I can actually see how Kody might be nice when meeting people in person. Kody clearly enjoys being in the public eye. I imagine that being recognized would definitely put him in a good mood. Therefore, if someone stops him to talk to him or wants to get his picture with him, I can definitely see him taking advantage of that. Being referred to as a super kind person, however, well, that may depend on who you ask. What's really interesting is how fans of Sister Wives tend to be split. There are fans of the show who really do think Kody is a good guy who made bad choices, and then there are the fans who get excited about meeting them in public and taking photos because at the end of the day, they're still reality TV celebrities. I do find myself wondering how often this happens. How many times do Kody and Robyn get stopped by people when they're out and about? It must happen at least occasionally. I'm also curious where exactly this mall encounter took place. Maybe it was in Flagstaff. Maybe somewhere like Scottsdale. Post didn't say. All we know for sure is that it happened at a mall, and apparently Robyn smelled like onions, which raises so many questions. Did she just come from somewhere that served onions? Were they eating nearby? Did she cook earlier in the day and the smell somehow stayed on her clothes? Or, and this is the part that really makes me laugh, was she somehow cutting onions at the store? 'Cause if you're at the mall, where exactly are you getting onions in the first place? Honestly, the whole thing just leaves me with more questions than answers. But while I was thinking about all that, I came across another update that caught my attention, this time about Janelle Brown. Janelle recently moved into her new house. Apparently, the construction wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, and she's finally settling in. And if you've been following her journey lately, you know she's been talking a lot about rediscovering herself in her 50s. It seems like she's going through a pretty big personal awakening right now. In many ways, it looks like she's slowly unpacking and re-examining the environment she lived in for years. The belief system, the family structure, all of it. For a long time, her life revolved around the group dynamic of that plural marriage. Decisions weren't just personal decisions. They were family decisions. They were community decisions. Now she's in a place where she's realizing she can actually make choices just for herself. And on one level, I'm genuinely glad she's experiencing that kind of growth. It's never too late to figure out who you are outside of a system that defined your life for decades. But there's another side to this that raises some eyebrows. Janelle has also started offering coaching services. She's selling advice and guidance to people who want help navigating their own lives. And that's where things get a little complicated for some viewers, because many of us watch these women spend years in a situation where they were clearly struggling, emotionally, financially, and relationally. We saw them deal with unfair treatment and difficult circumstances with Kody, so it's interesting to see them now stepping into roles where they're giving life advice to others. It almost makes you wonder if there's something in their religious or cultural background that encourages them to take on these guidance roles. Maybe it's part of how they've always been taught to see themselves, as people who share wisdom and help others navigate life. Till the optics can feel a little unusual. In one of her recent posts, Janelle talked about the challenge of making decisions when you're not used to doing it on your own. She explained that for most of her life, decisions were made as a group. There were always other people to check in with, other opinions to consider, other approvals to wait for. And then, at some point, you realize something powerful. You don't actually need permission anymore. She described designing her new home and how every choice has been hers alone. The land, the layout, the details that will shape what her little farm becomes. At 55 years old, she's discovering what it feels like to make those choices freely. Now that's a meaningful realization. But it's also interesting because longtime viewers might remember that Janelle didn't always wait for Kody's approval. For example, she bought that trailer without asking him first. And she made the decision to leave Flagstaff for a while without getting his permission either. So while it's clear she's going through a process of reflection and growth, saying she's just now realizing she doesn't need permission might feel a little simplified. Till personal change rarely happens all at once. Sometimes people take steps forward, then only later fully understand what those steps meant. In the same post, Janelle also talked about what it means to be a strong and independent woman. She explained that strength doesn't mean you never need help. Instead, it means choosing your support system carefully and intentionally. She reflected on everything she's experienced: divorce, loss, watching her children grow up and move on, and seeing the life she thought she was building shift into something completely different. Moments like that tend to reshape how people think about strength. For Janelle, it seems that strength now means trusting her own judgment. It means believing in her ability to make decisions. And it means surrounding herself with the right people who support those decisions rather than control them. In other words, it's not about doing everything alone. It's about knowing that the choices you make are truly your own. She mentioned that she often talks with women in their 50s and 60s who feel a little lost. These are women who may be looking toward retirement or realizing that their lives didn't turn out quite the way they once imagined. Many of them feel like they're standing at the edge of a brand new chapter but aren't quite sure how to begin it. According to Janelle, that's the work she feels most passionate about right now, helping women understand that they're not behind in life. Instead, they're simply at a moment where they finally have the freedom to choose what comes next. And that idea on its own is actually a very encouraging message. But the part that makes me pause is the coaching program she's offering. Life coaching as a field isn't really regulated in the same way therapy or counseling is. Anyone can start offering coaching services without the kind of training or licensing that therapists go through. And when you look at Janelle's background, she spent many years inside a religious structure that had strong control over people's choices and relationships. We watched on television how complicated and emotionally difficult that environment could be. Because of that, it sometimes feels like the advice she's sharing comes mainly from her own personal experiences rather than from professional training. Now, personal experiences can absolutely be powerful. People often learn a lot through the things they've lived through. But if someone is struggling deeply or needs real guidance, a licensed therapist or counselor might be a safer place to turn. Of course, I also understand that she needs to earn a living. Life after the show looks very different for all of them. They're figuring out how to support themselves and build new paths forward. I just sometimes wish the ways they chose to do that didn't involve selling life advice to people who might assume these women have everything figured out. Because if there's one thing we learned from watching the show over the years, it's that a lot was happening behind the scenes that viewers didn't fully see at the time. For a long stretch of years, the full truth about what those relationships were really like wasn't being shared publicly. At the same time, I do want to give credit where it's due. Janelle has taken big steps toward independence. Leaving a long-term marriage, redefining your life, and starting over after loss is not easy. She's clearly been through a lot emotionally, and it does take courage to rebuild your life after something like that. But sometimes the healthiest step a person can take is to focus inward for a while, really working through their own healing before trying to guide others. I once had a therapist tell me something that stuck with me. She explained that when people are hurting deeply, they sometimes throw themselves into helping or fixing other people. Not because they're trying to be dishonest, but because it's easier than sitting with their own pain. When you're focused on solving someone else's problems, you don't have to look directly at the trauma or wounds you're carrying. I realized that pattern existed in my own life too. For years, I repeated the same kinds of relationships. I ignored warning signs. I tried to fix people. And somewhere along the way, I lost pieces of myself in those dynamics. It took a lot of therapy and self-reflection to finally recognize those patterns and understand where they came from. One of the biggest lessons I had to learn was how to trust my instincts, those quiet feelings that tell you when something isn't quite right. After doing that work and really taking time to understand myself, my life eventually moved in a much healthier direction. I ended up in a strong marriage, and we've now been together for 17 years. But the truth is, I wouldn't have been ready for that kind of relationship if I hadn't done the hard work of healing first. And even with all of that experience behind me, I still don't feel comfortable telling other people how they should live their lives. That's why, when I think about Janelle's situation, part of me just hopes she gives herself the time and space to keep healing and growing. Sometimes focusing on your own journey is the most valuable thing you can do. Anyway, like I said earlier, I wasn't even planning to make a video today. But then I saw that photo and that little comment about onions, and suddenly my brain started running with it. So now I'm left with a few very random questions. Does Robyn actually have bad hygiene? Is she secretly wearing onion-scented perfume to keep Kody at a distance? Or, this is my favorite theory, is she secretly a vampire who uses garlic and onions as some kind of protective shield? Honestly, who knows? But now I'm curious what you think. Share your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks so much for watching.